Indiana football continues to put in the work on the recruiting trail, and here are more names that you need to know.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm Jacob Goins, the host of the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Joining us today is our Locked On recruiting expert and IU grad, Brian Smith. My man, it's great to have you back on the program because here we are again. It's another week and Indiana football is still in the recruiting news with some big-time names. Are you starting to hear Indiana even more than when we've talked last about being in it for all these big-time kids in 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, because they're starting to get official visits lined up. It's one thing to hear their name. It's another to see, okay, this kid's officially announced I'm visiting and fill in the blank. Well, IU was never that school when I was growing up. It was Penn State, it was Ohio State, it was Michigan, etc. Well, now Indiana, not only locally like Ohio, Chicago, Indianapolis, it's Florida, it's back east, New Jersey. It's all over the place. And that's kind of refreshing because college football needs a little influx of new anyway, because so many teams continuously win. Indiana's changed their guard a little bit in terms of how they do things. And I give them credit. I'm still surprised every time I see a kid that's a really good player because I'm just so unused to this happening. I admit it. But hey, man, I'll take it.
Well, speaking of big names, we're going to start with a guy, Cameron McHaney, who the last time you joined us on the show, we had just brought him up. He had just started to kind of get into the rotation. Not only is he interested in Indiana, and not only is Indiana interested in him, he is a hot commodity right now. And I know you've been sending me some videos of him in some different workouts, and he looks the part, man. And we're going to talk about other names on this episode too. We'll talk some basketball later on once you aren't with us. But we're going to dive into Cameron McHaney because a 3-star D lineman who is only going to get better. And Indiana's squarely in the mix for a kid that's only climbing up the ranks, Brian.
It's interesting that he's a 3-star. He's at IMG Academy. He's beat out a kid for the starting spot there. They have more Power 4 kids than they do starting spots at IMG. Must be a great problem to have.
Yeah.
But the kid that he beat out has 50 offers. So, I mean, he's just not the tallest kid in the world. He's just a little over 6 foot. He's a one gap and go interior defensive lineman, but he's really good as a pass rusher, which is weird. Most interior guys suck at it. And he's a guy that plays with that high motor that you want, and he's 310. Okay, I'm good. We don't really have to figure a whole lot else out. The other thing that makes me confident in him, and I know Indiana fans won't like this much, but Indiana and Illinois are probably his two primaries. Illinois obviously is a rival, but that staff knows defense.
Yeah.
That staff does a really good job, and they want him. So when I was talking to him before and after he competed this past weekend in Miami Under Armour, those are definitely the two schools to watch. There are others involved. Michigan's kind of backed off. That was the school that worried me because that's the school he grew up rooting for, but they're not coming after him. So he's going to fall through the cracks because he's not a 6'4" guy. I don't think Indiana cares because, again, rep after rep, he won against P4 competition. And that's all I really needed to see anyway. But I saw his high school film from this past season and knew that he was a guy because he's getting elite coaching at IMG. They got NFL guys on staff. Jeff Blake, the former NFL quarterback, is part of it. He's in the NFL 15 years. That's just one of them. Yeah. So it's a different kind of deal. He'll come in, and I think he'll play. He goes to Indiana or Illinois as a freshman.
Well, I mean, he steps in and onto the campus of either one of those programs and instantly becomes one of the best players on the defensive side of the football, I think, given where they are and kind of trying to get some ground and gain some ground in the Big Ten. You talked about McHaney's pass rush, but he plays inside. Any chance in the college level he could possibly move to the edge a little bit and use that pass rushing ability?
Well, I mean, if you could go with some 3-man fronts, yeah, you could do that, but he's a big guy. He's not got the length to play as a pure pass rusher on the edge. He's not going to dip and rip. but he'll run over you. I saw him do that a few times. He can one hand stab somebody, hold him off, and then just his leverage. Not many guys can do much with it. So he's not the best player in the country, but he's one of those guys that maximizes every rep, and you're not going to out-technique him. So, again, I'm a little surprised he doesn't have more attention from other programs, but like Indiana and Illinois are out in front, and he's got other offers, but those are the only ones that really come up in conversation.
Yeah, like Louisville, Purdue, they're in there, but they have offers out. But you're saying Indiana and Illinois. Is there something before we move on to the next segment and talk about some other big names that people need to keep an eye on? Is there something for Indiana that could set us apart? What is it about the staff or the location or what they did a year ago? I mean, in your mind, is there anything when it comes to Cameron McHaney or any of these other guys that could set Indiana apart?
It's the playoff run. That's been the consistency with talking to kids. I mean, there's no way around it. It was the first playoffs, and they're in it. And it's Indiana. I mean, they've never expected to be in that kind of role. Let's
Sure.
be honest. So everybody was taken back, but they won 11 football games last year. The only teams they lost to were the two that played in the national championship. So, I mean, that's really impressive. So that comes up in conversation. I've read about that as well. So now getting them on campus this month is actually very, very important. The Hoosiers have spring ball like everybody else. The kids coming up and seeing what it looks like and why they got to that point starts right now. Spring ball, making sure these guys come for unofficials, as many as you can. I know it's not easy for everybody. Ball with the visits. The kids that visit in March are more often going to end up taking OVs. That's the bottom line. March is very, very important.
And Indiana's got a bunch of guys set up for official visits in June. We'll tell you about some of those names, including a wide receiver who was committed to Penn State that Indiana could very well be in the mix for. We'll talk more about that next here on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no place better to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off of you want to be in on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my favorite team or you want a late game rally and you want to be a part of it, you can be there and you never miss your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers, your daily spot for all things Indiana athletics. I'm your host, Jacob Goins. Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting expert and host of the Portal podcast. Be sure you go and check that out. A daily show covering the portal, recruiting. You're all over that, man. And we appreciate you always hopping on and willing to jump on and talk about the biggest names that Indiana is going after. While Cameron McHaney's great, he is just one kid, and we got a lot more that I want to talk about. And we mentioned a wide receiver who was committed to Penn State, has since decommitted, and apparently Indiana in the mix with the likes of folks like Ohio State as well.
Yeah, I don't know how this happens, but sometimes you just turn on the film and it's obvious that a kid is a special player. Jerquaden Guilford is by far the best player in Indiana, in my opinion, in the class of 26. He's at Northrop and Fort Wayne. That's a program that's always had good athletes, basketball and everything else, but yet he's a 3-star. Maybe it's just because he's in Northern Indiana, but like he makes people look really bad.
Yeah.
That's an elite football player. That's a potential NFL football player. 6'2", 6'3", runs like a deer and makes guys miss in space like he's a 5'9" slot receiver. I don't know what's going on there. That's the kind of player that can go into the Indiana if he has the right attitude and play right away.
Yeah.
Like he's the kind of guy that Ohio State gets, etc. That's super annoying that goes in the first 2 rounds of the draft.
Who just shoots up the boards and he goes to have an NFL career. Yeah,
exactly. So to have this kid in your backyard is important. To my knowledge, Notre Dame's not after him. Maybe they are, and I'm unaware. Maybe they just started. But if you can get that out of the way, that kind of helps you. And on top of it, again, he's in Fort Wayne. It's not like he's that far away. He's like 3.5 hours from campus. So I think that's one of the most important recruits in recent IU football history. You're throwing the ball around. You've got an offense that will make that happen. You're probably going to throw it around quite a bit again this next season. There's something to show him again. I mentioned a little bit ago, getting kids down for visits. This is the kid above all else because he's an in-state player that you have to get on campus. Now there's some other guys too, Casimir Hicks, et cetera, that you need to get.
Yeah.
There's plenty of guys, but this is a change the game kind of guy on offense where teams have to adjust their defense from play to play based on where he's lined up.
Yeah, he's 6'2", 190 pounds. He is rated as the third player in the state. You are saying it, and I agree just by watching it. He's the best athlete that the state has had, not just this year, but in probably quite some time. Let's be real.
Yeah, that's not a normal kid. It's those kids usually in Indiana just play basketball. That's the history of the state.
It's true. It is. It's true. And yet he's balling out on the football field. According to 247, Indiana, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Ohio State are all supposed to be in the mix. He did say, however, even though he decommitted from Penn State, they would stay in the rotation. And I got to ask you, from a recruiting expert side of things, how often do you see a guy like this at this caliber decommit from a Power 4 program and then end up back at the same Power 4 program, or at least give them a fair shake by the end of it?
20-25%. This is a little unusual. There's usually a parting of the ways because a coach left, something happened that they didn't like, the mom didn't like something, whatever. I think in this case, he committed early. Penn State does a great job as a staff recruiting. They're one of the best in the country. So I'm guessing that he's looking at this kind of like I just said, like he's really, really good. He just wants to make sure that he makes the right decision because he's probably going to get like Bama and schools like that offering to. That'd be my guess. Like, again, he can play for anybody. Athletically, it's hilarious to watch his film because, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody because Fort Wayne's got good football. It's really good football. But the high school kids have no chance against him. Once he has the ball in his hands, good luck. So it's pretty comical. And again, I like Hicks and I like some other guys in the state. It's not close. He's the best player in the state long-term in terms of a physical gift standpoint. And maybe he's a guy that's got to work on things off the field. I have no idea. But if he has his house in order, he'd go to Ohio State or anywhere. By the end of his second year on campus, he's going to play. He's going to be a playmaker.
Yeah. So
Indiana, if they want to be a consistent team, you can't let that kind of guy leave your state.
Because they don't come through often, and we want to talk about Hicks in a second. But when they do, IU has to lock them down. You've got to get the Hoosiers
100%.
data. We're going to talk about some guys from New Jersey and Georgia and things like that in just a second. But when you get players like this in here, it's hard to not let them go to Ohio State, Notre Dame, or places like that. But if you are building a culture, building a brand, he is one. Again, Jerquaden Guilford, and then Hicks too, right? We wanted to talk about him. Guys in state that the Hoosiers have to try and land.
Skill guys for Indiana, you think of the offense, but not many people realize this. Indiana's defense last year, I believe it was number 1 in the nation against the run.
Yep.
And part of that was the defensive secondary tackled pretty well. Minus even the play against Jeremiah Love, that one play, Notre Dame didn't do a whole lot for the majority of the game. It's not like Notre Dame's struggling to run the football. They did a really good job because they're physical, they're in the right positions, they tackle well. So it shouldn't be that hard to sell. Hicks might be the best DB in the state, and I think he is. And he's a guy I think he can play for any P4's program, and he's at Decatur Central. So he lives like an hour and 10 minutes from the campus. Even bad traffic day out of Indy, he's on campus, maybe an hour.
Right.
Purdue's terrible. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. They're terrible. He's not going there.
That's not mean. That's okay. They know it. They know it's okay.
And I don't think Notre Dame is after him. So
I haven't heard. Yeah.
If that's the case, you have to get that kid. So, I mean, Indiana, are they going to get the best players in the state this year? I think they should. I could see maybe a Bama or something got the receiver. Okay, that's one thing. But, I mean, right now you're kind of in the catbird seat here, man. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be coming off the first year of the playoff. But literally, it's the only time it's ever going to happen. You have to capitalize. They got Hicks, go Guilford. That's going to change your program. You can sell them in terms of social media. You can sell them in terms of kids stay home, and they're exciting players too. Because like, if you wanted to play Hicks on offense, you could. You could play him at running back. You could play him at receiver. I just happen to personally like him at DB, and I don't even care if it's safety or nickel or corner. He can play any of it.
He's just that good. Again, he's another guy that's just that talented. And those are the ones here in Indiana. But a couple of names quickly before we get out of here and talking a little basketball. Dana Greenhow from Georgia. He is in that list. He'll be taking his official visit in June along with Liberty, NC State. I feel like he's somebody as an athlete that could play both sides of the football that is gaining some big time momentum. And also Logan Nagel from New Jersey, the 6'5", 250 D lineman who's got the likes of BC, Rutgers, and some of those in there as well. So a Georgia and a New Jersey kid. So we're branching out a little bit here, Brian. We're seeing every part of the country here.
Well, like Nagel, for instance, he plays at DePaul Catholic. It's one of the better programs back east. And he's a kid that's a good pass rusher. It's a natural edge. Never have enough of those guys. So sign me up there. I mean, when you look at like Greenhow, I saw him play last year, and he plays at one of the best programs in the South. I don't know if you can really have enough kids from the greater Atlanta area. Is that possible? Probably not. So they're getting in that area. And I was just at Under Armour Miami. There's another kid that's visiting, Cavante Hugan. I saw him. Yep. He's a pass rusher from Florida. They got coming for a visit. It's just constant. So there's a lot of different things that when I was growing up, these kids didn't even consider Indiana. Now they're taking OVs. The only thing left for the Indiana staff to do is the obvious. They got to sign them. But they've done all the legwork. Now you got to get them on campus and make it official.
And I think a big part of it, too, is even if you don't get all these guys, the fact that you're making a name for yourself, for the brand in Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, New Jersey, Illinois, Wisconsin, wherever the heck you're going, you're starting from the ground up. Because as you said, this has just never happened before. So Indiana's not going to get all these guys that we've talked about in the several conversations we've had, but they're there. They're in the conversation, and maybe that could lead to success down the road in 27, 28, heck, 2030 if possible, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said. If you look at the players they're going after, you kind of gain a rep. Certain schools, kids will say, we want an O from, like Clemson's usually the most coveted O because they don't offer hardly anybody. They're very picky. Yeah. Clemson, maybe it's LSU or High State or Notre Dame, whatever. Indiana's starting to gain a little. I mean, there's still a ways to go, but now it's a spot that kids in the South area, like I've lived down South a long time, they don't want to go to Indiana. Now they're getting all these kinds of kids from Georgia and Florida want to visit. This is a wild turnaround.
Brian Smith, he is our Locked On recruiting expert. He also hosts a show called The Portal. Tell them about that really, really quick, how they can find it, what you guys are doing every single day.
Yeah, man, the Locked On The Portal, it's just recruiting, NIL, transfer portal. Every single day, there's something going on. Recruiting rankings, information about top prospects, Indiana to USC to Texas to Miami. It's everybody in the country.
Be sure to check it out. It's part of our Locked On podcast network. But coming up in our final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers, Indiana hosting Ohio State. Is it a play-in game for the NCAA tournament? And why did the Hoosiers have to win? We'll talk about that coming up next right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers, they don't lie. And when it comes to the Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. When you're off exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more today at nissanusa.com. All right, final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here. Greatly appreciate Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting expert, for joining us. We've had him on several times now talking about some of the biggest names that you need to know for Indiana football recruiting, and appreciate him stopping by with us. But now we get back to basketball, where tomorrow is the regular season finale. That's right. Saturday is it. Indiana and Ohio State. You're talking about two teams, two brands that are just massive in the sports world. And now you get two teams who are equal in the Big Ten standings. Indiana's just one game better on the overall record, and two teams that still don't exactly know where they stand in the NCAA tournament, right? Ohio State has been a bubble team. Indiana's been in and out of the bubble, right? We know where you are for now, but we just don't know what the cards have in stake for Sunday, on Selection Sunday, which is a week from this coming Sunday. So we're just over 7 days from that. And this game means so much to both sides, right? We'll start with the Buckeyes before talking about your Indiana Hoosiers. For Ohio State, it's been a bumpy ride this season. They started off all the way back in the beginning, right, of the year with a win over a ranked Texas team, which looked good at the time. And it was like, all right, cool. Ohio State's going to be pretty good. And I'll be honest, if you listened or watched the show, Ohio State and Michigan were the two teams in this conference that I said we needed to look out for. I said that people needed to keep your eyes on the Wolverines and the Buckeyes. And it was because of the transfers that they brought in. And Ohio State has not fully panned out to what I thought they would be. Michigan is incredible. I think they're reeling as of late, but I still think a really good team. But Ohio State still has a chance to make the NCAA tournament. And they've had a bumpy ride. It's been up and down. They've got good wins. They've got ugly losses. But hey, don't we all, right? But they've won their last couple, and they're coming into Bloomington, I would think, feeling pretty good about themselves off of what was an insane game over Nebraska, 116-114, a double overtime. Two teams who were on the bubble, one got in, one is now out. And they still have one more chance, if you're the Buckeyes, to secure a spot in the tournament. And no better way to do it than on the road. For them, it's a quad one opportunity. For us, not so much when they come inside to Assembly Hall. And I think with the Buckeyes, you look at them, they're a very guard-heavy team. They've got some dudes. There's no doubt about it, but they are very guard-heavy. It's a team that can shoot sometimes. It's a team that can score sometimes. It's a team that can stop you sometimes. Other times, it's, you know what? Let's just let you go off. They've had 15, 20, 30-point losses this season in what has been just an up and down season, the best way to describe it for both of these squads. You remember, this is the second matchup of the year where Indiana went to Columbus and got that win by a single point. We're going to have to try and do it again, but this time we get to do it inside of our own building. And not a whole lot has changed about this Ohio State team. They run through Bruce Thornton. He's their man. He's the one that averages over 17 points a game. They've got four more dudes who average 12, 13 or more, and three of those are guards. So you have to focus on Mobley, Parrish, Thornton. It's guys like Aaron Bradshaw, Michi Johnson, I thought were going to be more of an impact. Michi Johnson, of course, has only played 10 games this season. And so you are looking at a roster that's got some big names, just hasn't been able to produce in the big moments. And I think for Indiana in this game, as we look at the stakes, look at some of the matchups here, we have to play like this is our season. We have to play like everything is on the line right now, because we truly don't know what they're going to do with us on Selection Sunday. And I think with the win over Washington didn't do you a whole lot. The loss against Oregon was a shot to the gut because you had a chance to win and you couldn't do it in your last quad one opportunity. Now you've got to play an Ohio State team that I think you'll get credit for. I do. I think you will get credit for this game if you win it, because Ohio State is considered a tournament team in most places that you look. Is it quad one? No, it's not for us. But I do think you'll get credit because it's a tournament team. But if you lose, then it's like, I don't know. I mean, Yeah, they won some games against big teams, but they lost to the last two games they played against good teams. Hoosiers couldn't get it done. And I've been telling you on this podcast, recency bias is a real, it's a real thing. It is. It's a real thing, especially when it comes to the NCAA tournament. And so if you're the Hoosiers, you treat this like your season is up for grabs right now. If you win, you're in. If you lose, your season is done. That needs to be the mindset. Now, whether that will be what it is, I don't know, because guess what? Mike Woodson's still the head coach, and we have no idea what they're going to be. Then you got to worry about the Big Ten tournament, but you worry about that later. You cannot go into the Ohio State game thinking, it's all right, whatever happens, happens. We've got the Big Ten tournament. We're fine. We'll make up for it there. It's a bad spot to be. I told you yesterday, that's a bad spot to be. You do not want to have your NCAA tournament lives hanging in the balance of your performance in the conference tournament. You just don't want to do it. It's not where you want to be. And so I think for the Hoosiers matchup wise, we've got to take advantage of our bigs down low, Malik Renew, Umar Ballo, however you want to play them. They've got to have a big day. If our guards can take care of the basketball, whether it's Galloway or Leal, or if it's Rice, or heck, if Cannon Carlisle decides to start playing some more, or they let him start playing some more, you just got to take care of the basketball. And don't let guys like Thornton go off. Don't let somebody like Mobley get hot, because look, this team doesn't shoot it all that great, okay? They shoot 47% from the floor as a team. They shoot 75% from the free throw line, and they do shoot at 37% from downtown, but it's very, very streaky. Take advantage of being at home. Turn this team over, get after them, and get out and run. And if you do that, you have a good chance to win in your final home game in Assembly Hall of the year. It's going to be senior day. You're going to have guys honored. It's going to be great. You just got to make it great. So Indiana hosting Ohio State. Is it a true play-in game? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. But the Hoosiers need to treat it this way, because I can promise you this, Ohio State will. The Buckeyes will treat it like a play-in game. Question is, will Indiana do the same? All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you so much for being here and for another great week, man. We've had great shows. Be sure you go back and check them out if you missed them. Again, appreciate Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting expert, joining us as well. Have a great weekend, Hoosier fans, and we'll see how it goes for the Hoosiers and the Buckeyes. We're back on Monday. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.